ridiculous fondling cardboard.
What is up, Adam? How you doing, man?
Good. I'm glad to join you again. Look forward to the discussion.
Absolutely. I enjoyed our conversation because I often talk with golf fans and card collectors. You are both, and you bring a different side of the conversation, which is a little bit more in-depth knowledge about the professional inner workings of golf. So I'm hoping to, talk cards, but also a little bit more about some of the selection criteria for Olympics, majors, and how all of these, are quantified. So, but before we dive into that, we just wrapped up the Olympics. I gave my little summary in a recent episode, but what's your takeaway and your look back on the Olympics?
Yeah, what I thought was going to be very unexciting back nine turned into an incredible finish, both for positives for some and negatives for others. Quite frankly, I almost turned it off when Rahm had a 4-shot lead through 10 holes. I kind of thought that was it. Didn't think anybody was really going to catch him, and two quick bogeys sort of got my attention back to him. And then at the same time, Scotty started to go on his birdie run, and so he had, I think, 5 birdies in a row on the back to shoot 29, which is incredible. And then Rahm continued to fall. I mean, he doubled a par 5. That was the easiest hole on the golf course that day. And so outside of, kind of the extreme collapse that he had that was unexpected, Scotty's run was just as impressive. And, there was other people. Rory was in the mix. He had 4 birdies in a row and was only a shot or two back. And then he doubled a hole. He had 110 yards to go in the hole, and he put it in the water. And so it's pretty clear that some pressure got to both those guys, and Scotty took the advantage of it.
Yeah, I agree that John Rahm looked like he was running away with it. I also was thinking, is this even worth having on? It was a opportune time of the day though, because being overseas, it was a morning finish, and so we could leave it on while we were having breakfast and helping the kids get ready for the day. So I just had it on in the background, and my attention just got piqued as John started faltering and Scotty was going on a run. I'm going to hold up a card, another guy that was going on a run here. I'm really glad to have bought this card during the Olympics. For those of you who are paying attention to Instagram, I'm obviously at the Golf Card Collector. I've posted this already. This is a Tommy Fleetwood 1 of 1 rookie card from 2024 Team Great Britain Tops. And I didn't even know this card existed, but apparently these Tops Olympics cards for Team Great Britain was released back in like March or April. And I was shocked when this card, when I actually didn't see this card right away. I just came across him and thought, oh my goodness, what kind of parallels does he have? I saw Tommy Fleetwood out of 5 listed for, I think it was like 80 or 90 or $100, something like that. I thought, I was tempted. I thought, should I try and negotiate this? And I thought, let's take a look at what other cards have sold. And back when this product was released, this 1 of 1 sold for like $15 US. And I was like, my jaw dropped. I thought, oh my God, I would have bid 10 times that amount if I had known this card was being auctioned. So that's something to be said to these card manufacturers. Like, make sure your products are known when they're released. Like, people need to be aware or else they won't buy them. And so I did do a bit of research. These Topps Team Great Britain cards were sold on the Topps UK website. So it wasn't, I don't believe it was a product that you'd buy packs or boxes of. It was like bought on demand. So you'd buy like a team set or individual cards. And I believe the rare parallels like this 1 of 1 that I'm holding in my hand was either randomly inserted. So they would have printed 100 or several hundred Tommy Fleetwood cards, and one of them would be randomly inserted, or else it would have been listed as a buy it now, 1 of 1, buy it now out of 5, etc. Anyways, what do you think of the card, and what do you think of Tommy Fleetwood's performance?
Yeah, no, the card's awesome. I mean, anytime you can hold a 1-on-1 in something is definitely that's probably something that I currently don't have. I almost pulled a 1-on-1. It was just a fleer of Will Zalatoris a couple weeks. I think just this last week it closed on eBay. But it was interesting following Tommy because this is one of the first and only tournaments you see where second and third matter. And so kind of seeing his strategy, particularly on the 18th hole that had water, lurking on that second shot. That was a very difficult second shot, and he didn't flirt with the water at all. And I don't blame him. He needed a birdie to get into a playoff, but he needed a par to hold on to the silver medal. So that's kind of an interesting thing about the the Olympics is that, first place isn't necessarily, yes, that is what everyone's shooting for, but second and third are a big deal, whereas fourth is nothing. And, Rory got fourth for the second Olympics in a row, and, he goes home with nothing. And so awesome that Tommy was able to play well, and the course was a good fit for him. And like I said, it was fun to watch him. He got a bad break on 17 where he bogeyed because his ball rested against basically the rough, the color of the rough and the short grass, and he had a really difficult chip. But he played really well.
Was that on 17?
Yes, 17.
So that's, yeah, going right down to the end, because if he had, did he bogey or par that hole?
He bogeyed 17.
Mm.
So I think he was still one shot back because Scotty went on his run and had finished a few holes ahead. But that bogey cost him a playoff at the very least.
Yeah, that's disappointing for Tommy, but a silver medal is still an incredible feat for someone who has yet to win on the PGA Tour.
Yeah.
Probably the most talented player to yet win, although a plethora of runner-up finishes, including that famous Canadian playoff against Nick Taylor at the RBC Canadian Open, which of course I'm grateful that Tommy didn't win that one.
That was
But
an epic.
that's right. Yeah. And I remember Tony Finau was the guy years ago who was the best player who had not won on tour. And he ended up going on a pretty hot streak, winning, 4 events or something like that in quick succession, probably 2 years ago. I hope Tommy, breaks the seal eventually and then ends up going on a tear in a similar way. I think he can. I think he has all the ingredients to be a fan favorite. So well deserved. So you mentioned already, I'll make it very clear. Obviously, Scotty Scheffler won the gold medal. He did what Scotty does and just ran away with it in the back nine. Very reminiscent of, what the greats are capable of, like Tiger Woods. And I think that kind of put the nail in the coffin in terms of the Xander versus Scotty debate for 2024. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so. He's just, his floor is so high. I mean, literally at the top five is a normal thing for him. I think this past weekend where I think he got either T2 or three. It actually brought his total money earned down from his average, which is crazy to say because he still took home like $2 million. And so I think I'll say it's over. I mean, Xander could obviously still do well at the end of the season at the FedEx at the Tour Championship, but I think Scotty kind of hammered it home.
Yeah, and we will get to the Tour Championship pretty quickly, but let's just wrap up this Olympic conversation by, I guess, hitting on Xander, and then we'll get to the bronze medal finisher. So, what did you think of Xander Schauffele's finish at the Olympics?
Yeah, I don't know. You hate to say disappointed, but Sunday was not a good day for him. I think he was either two or three over on the day, and just didn't have it, and that's okay. I mean, it's that happens. You're not. It's hard to put four really good rounds together, and his was kind of a slow bleed. It wasn't a fall off the planet like Ron did, but he just didn't have it. So I don't put a whole lot of I guess weight on that kind of decline. It was a tough golf course where if you didn't have it and you're hacking out of the rough with the water that was lurking. So yes, it would have been great to see him on the podium again, but he just didn't have his best on that Sunday.
Hmm. A guy can have 27 fantastic rounds of golf, and that 28th round doesn't go his way. Just didn't eat the right breakfast in the morning, and fans can become fair weather all over again. Uh, Looking at the St. Jude, FedEx Cup round one playoff, I think Xander was right there at the top. He might have even finished ahead of Scotty. So uh, I think he's bounced back quickly to swing it back into cards before we talk golf again. I've been on a bit of a roll picking up Xander Schauffele cards since we talked last, which I told myself I'm just going to wait 6 months. I was going to let the heat cool off, and I just can't let my impulses. They always get the best of me. So, I'll just run through this list for those listeners to know what I've been buying. Hopefully, I don't have to sell any of these cards soon, but I probably do need to sell some other stuff to kind of refill the hobby bank. But I picked up a red out of 5 Topps Chrome Xander Schauffele retro card. I forget exactly what the insert set is, but it's kind of a throwback to some old baseball, basketball style of cards. So it's my favorite card in the set. So I picked up the red out of 5, and just yesterday I also won the black out of 10 parallel. I picked up the gold out of 50 about a week and a half ago. So anybody has the superfractor, I'm well on my way to getting the rainbow done. The only other tricky one to get would be the orange out of 25, and then all the other parallels would fall into place quite easily. So I don't know if that's really a goal of mine, but it's a possibility. I picked up the both the gold and the orange, so the gold out of 50, orange out of 25 of the Flames parallel. I just think it looks so darn cool. And because I told you in the last time we talked that I might go for the whole gold run, that was just one more box to check. And then the orange one I got because it just looks cool. It matches the style of the card. Then I picked up the last one I'll talk about is probably the most important one, the most significant one, and that's the uh, on-card autograph gold out of 50 of Xander Schauffele, where he's wearing the 2021 Olympics. Are we still calling it 2020 Gold Olympics, even though it happened in 2021?
21, it makes sense to me, but one of those qualifiers is just the COVID year, so to speak.
Yeah, and so he's wearing and holding his gold medal in the picture, and it's on-card autograph, Topps Chrome. Gold is my favorite parallel. So this card is something I was always aiming at when the prices were $500, then it went down to 400, then 300, 325, whatever. But it kind of stalled around there. And I was saying once it gets into the 100s, I'm going to pull the trigger. So bought this card for less than $200 and I'm very excited about it.
That's awesome. No, it's like I said, hopefully that one of one comes your way to complete it. Like I said, that's as we've talked previously, that's the hardest one to get for obvious reasons. And some of the things that I'm after, I don't even know if the one of one has been pulled yet. So because I've never seen it.
Yeah, there's been a handful of Xander Schauffele one of ones. Uh, None of the parallels that I've personally been interested in, and not necessarily at the prices that I can afford. So the retro one that I want, I'm glad that it hasn't been listed yet. Let's let everything cool off a little longer. Let's let all the lame parallels sell. Those superfractors can sell. And then the one I want, I'd love to get it for a better deal. So let's turn it to another guy. So let's finish off the podium. Holding up some cards here, and this guy that I've got my finger on right here, Hideki Matsuyama, is the bronze medal finisher. The cards I'm holding here are from 2021, I think, Leaf. These were a print to order type of card, or not print to order, but they would be on the website, kind of like what I described for the Tommy Fleetwood cards, and you'd buy a set. So the ones I'm holding is the green, I think it's called the Green Mojo or something like that. It from Upper Deck, this style they call tracks is the style of card. And these green cards on the back are all serial numbered out of 10. I put it in this kind of cool 3 card magnetic one-touch display that you can hang on the wall. And the other two are Bryson DeChambeau and Colin Morikawa. So this is just a fun little art piece that I have. So what do you think of Hideki's performance at the Olympics?
Yeah, I mean, Hideki is probably one of the biggest worldwide athletes. Obviously, the United States is not the world, but in terms of over in Asia, Hideki is it. Like that is they view him as kind of one of the greatest athletes that are currently or that's still playing. And so for him to have that performance in the Olympics is a big deal. Hideki has kind of always been an anomaly in a lot of ways, where he's always been an impressive ball striker. From tee to green has been so good. His putting has let him down. And so he seems to have found something in his putting. Obviously he played very well at the Olympics. And then this just yesterday, he finished off the first round or the first leg of the FedEx Cup playoffs with a win, and he led the field in putting. So it's one of those things where if he continues to putt well, he's going to be a very dangerous player, because he's always going to hit it close. It's just a matter of, is he going to drain enough putts for him to be in it? So a third place finish for him and a bronze medal was always good to see. I like Hideki. My favorite part about Hideki is when, he'll hit a tee shot and he'll finish with one hand off the club, and it'll be awful and it's in the middle of the fairway. And it's like, it's just funny to me what the difference between him hitting a bad shot probably went 10 yards less than he wanted it to. And, everybody else hits a bad shot and they're 40 yards off the fairway. But he's a fun golfer to watch, especially when he's putting it well.
You're absolutely right about his drives or his iron shots. He looks just frustrated and he can't believe it, and he misses it by like a yard or two, and the consequences are basically nothing. Like it's still a perfectly fine shot, but something ever so slightly he made him feel off about it. And on the flip side, when he hits an amazing shot, he's just totally stoic and has the same demeanor as somebody who hit an average shot. So he's very in control of his emotions, which actually makes what happened in the Olympics that much more meaningful, because you could tell he got a little bit fired up. I don't remember which green it was or which shot it was, but a few times, you could see whether it was his body language, little fist bumps, a little bit of smiles, smirks, those sorts of things. We got a Hideki at the Olympics that we don't normally get.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, that's kind of the cool thing about you look at international competitions like the Olympics or the Ryder Cup or the President's Cup, and it means a little bit more. You're representing a country that you don't typically get to kind of play under, even though it's always kind of in the background with PGA Tour events or LIV or other events. But really, to kind of put on those colors and represent is a big deal.
Yeah, somebody that comes to mind is another international golfer, Tom Kim. Young golfer, needed a medal at the Olympics to avoid mandatory military service in his home country. And I'm sure he was just as devastated at not earning that as much as missing out on a Olympic medal. I think he still has some other chances, like if he were to win a major, or if he were probably his best chance is to, I think, win the Asia Games or something like that.
Yes, yeah, he's got I think 3 more years or maybe four. I think might have another Olympics to try, but uh, the Asian Games is probably his best bet. I mean, he's got a chance to win a major too. Don't get me wrong, but obviously he's got much more competition. The field for the Asian Games is not as strong. Siwoo Kim and Sung Jae both got out of their mandatory military stuff by winning the Asian Games. So, but it's just one less opportunity that he has, and that's always tough because a lot of times they're having to take 2 years off in the prime of their career.
And not only that, but he was so close.
Yeah,
He could taste it. I think he had an excellent final round. I don't remember what his scorecards looked like each day, but he was top 10, maybe even top five or something. Or
I think he finished T8,
hmm.
but I think it was a bogey, maybe on the last or something. But he would have been top five but unfortunately just didn't quite have enough.
Hmm. The Olympic podium, I don't know if I could have drawn it up any better than how it shaped up. We have world number one Scotty Scheffler, who needed to, as amazing as his year has been, needed something big to really settle that Xander versus Scotty debate, and does it in spectacular fashion. So, well-deserved gold medal. Runner-up, Tommy Fleetwood has been playing fantastic. Wins a silver for the UK for Team Britain, and I couldn't be happier for him, especially having recently bought his one of one rookie card. And Hideki Matsuyama, a superstar from Asia, and a fantastic golfer to follow, completes the podium with three different countries, three different well-deserved players. When we look into the FedEx Cup playoffs, these three guys are playing incredible again. Hideki wins the first round. Scotty and Xander are both, I think, right after him in on the leaderboard in that event.
Yeah, I mean the FedEx Cup is interesting. I enjoyed this past one because they did a very good coverage of the top 50. So the top 50 was important to get into the tournament this week, the BMW Championship. So the coverage did an awesome job of really of showing how important that was. Tom Kim, for example, we'll talk about him. He finished 6-6-6, so he had a bogey and then he doubled and doubled, and he was safely in the top 50 and then found himself outside the top 50 because of that finish. And he had to have known where he stood because that's something Tom Kim does. Probably never this year on tour did he finish bogey double double at the end of a tournament. So it's while some of it is a manufactured excitement with the FedEx Cup playoffs, it's also there's a lot of intriguing stories on can you make the next tournament to give yourself a shot, as well as can you continue to play well. I mean, the prime example is Victor Hovland has had a pretty subpar year for his standards, and he goes out and plays very well at this tournament, gets three times the points for FedEx and I think he vaulted up to 14th on the points list. So another solid tournament for him this week, and he's got a chance to repeat as the champion of the Tour Championship. So the point system is interesting. It's tough to follow in some ways, but it's cool because it creates other storylines outside of just who got first place.
Yeah, I saw for Tom Kim, I think he came literally like 51st. So he
Yes.
just missed it by one place. So what a shame, although he wasn't fighting for avoiding military service, so he might not have had as big of consequences. It's just he misses out on the next round of the playoffs. And Tom Kim's funny. He's somebody that you think of as being clutch. Like that's kind of what he's known for, going back to his appearance in the President Cup, International versus USA. But if you look at his record there, I think he actually only won 2 matches and lost 2 matches, so he was 50-50. But perhaps that was just much better than the other international players. So you thanks for sharing, some of those players to be watching out for. I wanted to talk more uh, about points, the FedEx Cup points, rankings, the official world golf rankings, which we call the OWGR, and how those points work, and a bit of a conversation into like how we should compare different golf events to each other in terms of rankings in the FedEx Cup, points that they earn, points they earn in the OWGR, and also just in terms of legacy, like how many events on the PGA should be worth or equivalent to one major. So this is a whole conversation I wanted to get into. But since you brought up the FedEx Cup playoffs, why don't we just wrap that up? Like, were there any other storylines, anecdotes that we should watch out for before we talk kind of numbers?
I mean, the biggest thing that is probably not being talked about a whole lot is Rory got last this week. That's crazy. Rory McIlroy in the FedEx typically does very, very well, and so to see him get last. Granted, he's I don't think he liked the course very much, which that definitely does play a role. But to see him struggle, I think it was like his worst tournament, in the last 5 years off the tee, worst putting. Like it was across the board, pretty terrible. So it'll be interesting to see if he bounces back, because East Lake is somewhere where he typically does very well for the top 30 tournament. But currently, it's a Scotty Xander race. The whole year sort of kind of been that way, or at least since Xander won his first major. So it'll be interesting to see if anybody can kind of insert themselves into that conversation. They'll have to do well in this next tournament. Like I said, each one of these 3 tournaments, that you got the whole year that you create FedEx points. Each one of these tournaments is actually 3 times worth the amount of FedEx points. So you can jump up pretty quickly. I gave the example of Victor Hovland. He was, I think, mid 50s going into this tournament. He gets tied for second this week, and now he's 14. So you can jump up pretty quick. So if one of those guys has a good tournament this week, they could easily be in the top 3 or 4, which is important for the next week because of the strokes advantage that you get. First place on the list will be start at -10, seconds -8, and then it's 1 stroke down until you get to 0, which I think it's 20th through 30th start even par. So this week's very important if someone really wants to insert themselves into the Scotty and Xander race.
Absolutely. So for those who are not familiar with the FedEx Cup playoffs, there's 3 events. Top 70 make it to the first one at St. Jude. Is it at the same course every year, by the way?
They've changed it around a bunch. St. Jude, FedEx is always there. This week is actually Castle Pines, which is new. It's in Colorado or Utah, and it's at elevation. So it'll be interesting to see because they haven't had a pro tournament there in a long time.
Okay, so elevation, the balls are going to be flying hard, farther, thinner air. I can relate to that living in the Rocky Mountains. So then the second round of the playoffs, is that called the BMW?
Yes.
Okay, BMW top 50 in the FedEx Cup point standings qualify for round 2. And as you said, this week, round 2 is very important because top 30 in the standings after this week then qualify for the Tour Championship, which is the top 30 in the FedEx Cup standings. And that is where that staggered start begins. The first 2 rounds is even playing field, but that final Tour Championship is where the leader in the FedEx Cup standings gets that giant advantage of a 10-stroke under par start and it staggers down as you already described. Tour Championship is every year. That is consistent at East Lake.
Yep.
And Rory has been historically quite successful there. The same course where Tiger Woods broke his dry spell of wins when he came back from injury in 2017, was it? Or 2018, I think it was.
18. Yep.
2018, I remember that because that's when I moved into my current house. I remember standing in the living room where we didn't even have furniture yet, in this empty room, standing, watching on our TV, almost a tear coming to my eye because of how special that moment was. My wife's like,
Well,
"What?"
the wall of people that they let kind of follow in, and it was a pretty moving scene to say the least.
It really was. Who was he playing with again? A younger
He
guy
was
who.
playing with Rory was kind of got caught in the crowd,
Hmm.
but It was awesome.
So 6 years ago, Rory was only maybe 29, so maybe he was still considered a young guy at that time. Uh, so yeah, so Rory got swallowed up by the crowd. I don't know, the security couldn't rope off, keep people off of the fairways. The green just got encapsulated by the fans who were hooting and hollering. It was a moving moment. So that's some of the history of the actual event for those who aren't as familiar. Now, I guess I want to talk a bit about. Uh, well, here's what I'll do. This question came up in mailbag quite some time ago. Gosh, maybe a month ago, and I want to cue it up word for word, verbatim, and then let you kind of handle some of this because two guys asked questions that go together in my eyes. So Pat Bonnet asked, how should entries for Olympic golf work? World golf rankings or country picking their own players? And he refers to the fact that LIV got the shaft again. Now, when I got this question, I thought this would be great to kind of cover on its own. But then I remembered there was another question I hadn't addressed yet from Austin Bailey, who gives a disclaimer that this could be a controversial topic. He said, with there being some debate on Scotty versus Xander for Player of the Year, he'd be curious to get to know our thoughts on trying to conceptualize how to convert the meaning of different wins. So, for example, how many regular PGA Tour victories are approximately equal to one major? How much more heavily should the elevated events each season be weighted? How many LIV victories and or victories from other tours like the DP World Tour, Asia Tour, etc., should be equal to one PGA Tour victory? So these questions kind of go beyond just debating uh, legacy, career success, that sort of thing, which is probably the part that I'm most interested in. But from your point of view, someone who knows in depth how professional golf works, they're essential to creating a fair official world golf ranking system, which is widely used in determining who makes it into the Olympics, who makes it into the majors, etc. So it's more than just sort of an anecdotal comparison. It's essential in quantifying how players qualify into events and are ranked in general. So, what do you think is the best place to kind of answer these questions from our mailbag?
Yeah. So there's kind of two components to the question that are important. Is one, the OWGR is important, will always be important. It's the fairest way to determine who should qualify for majors, how you figure out what the strength of field is. Now, I say fairest. The difficult part with this is LIV currently does not get OWGR, and there's a reason for that. They applied. The biggest things that's keeping LIV away from getting OWGR points it's twofold. One, 54 holes, it does not hit the OWGR's baseline that they have. 72 holes is kind of where they've set it at. And then secondly, what's probably the biggest one is there's no way to qualify to play a LIV event. And that is a big problem because let's just say you and I wanted to put together, 30 of our buddies, invite only, and we're also paying people to play that event. That's not fair. And so they've got rejected based off of kind of the closed off. While you and I can't rock up to a PGA tournament ourselves and play, there are ways to qualify for those tournaments. And there's a relegation kind of way to be demoted from tours to the Korn Ferry Tour and lower. And there's ways to be promoted up with PGA, earning your PGA card, whether it be through the Korn Ferry Tour, the DP World Tour, or through Q School. So that structure currently doesn't exist with LIV, and that's kind of the biggest point of contention between the two. Is, do I think LIV has strong enough players that they should get OWGR? Absolutely. Are they following the current set of rules? They are not. And so I get why they were rejected. Now, LIV is trying to change that. I don't know if the changes they're going to make are going to be big enough. They currently have a drop zone where they're relegating, I believe, 6 or 8 players at the end of this season. Some big names. Bubba Watson's currently in the relegation zone, and he's a captain of one of the teams, which will be interesting to see how that plays out. But I don't know. And then they've got a tournament for potential LIV members to qualify into that. It's still a very closed structure. And so that's a difficult part of things. as far as the OWGR, how it's sort of not the greatest representation currently. It's currently made up of 7 members. 4 of those happen to be the owners of the majors. So the PGA Tour has a member, was one of the people who make decisions. The Masters, the Open, the British Open, as well as the PGA Championship does as well. So the others, there's 3 others, I can't remember, but the controlling aspect of them is the majors. So to qualify into majors, you have to be, the Masters is the top 50, the US Open, I believe, is the top 60 or 70, and the British Open is the same way. So the OWGR is important because it's able to almost build out half the field based off of those rankings. And so if you're in the top, we'll just use the Masters because it's the simplest. If you're in the top 50 at a certain point of the year, you are going to qualify for the Masters. And that's your way in. There's other ways to get in. The Masters is one of the most exclusive to get in, just based off of, it's pretty much the top 50 and then other small exemptions. The US Open and the British Open have qualifying. LIV golfers could have gone through the qualifying period, and some did qualify that way. It's a grueling way to do it, but if you feel confident about your skills and abilities and you are one of the top players, you should get through. Problem is, it's based off one day a lot of times, and so if you have a bad day, then unfortunately it's not going to work out for you. But the way the OWGR currently is set up is it's a 2-year rolling period. So it's, we'll just use Scotty, for example. So he just got, a top 3 in this. It's from that point 2 years back. There is some recency, I don't want to say bias, but your last 13 tournaments are what are weighted the most. So as you play more tournaments and your tournaments drop to, let's just say, a year out, it doesn't count nearly as much. And so it's weighted on some recency stuff. And then obviously, 2 years ago, you'll start dropping big tournaments there as well. So that's important to know. The other way to kind of get your number higher or be ranked higher is based off strength of field. Strength of field is based off OWGR. So if we look at last week, for example, it's a signature event, 70 people, 70, I would guess all 70 were probably in the top 100 of the OWGR. It's based off the FedEx points for them, but I would assume they're probably very similar. And so that field, strength of field, would be quite strong. Whereas if you look at the John Deere, for example, probably one of the weakest fields in all of the PGA Tour for the entire year. While it has a deep field, it's a tournament where it has the cut. There was 145 golfers. That's an extremely weak field because I think they had one of the top 30 guys there. But the fact that it was 150 players still made it a fairly strong event because of the depth. It's, the depth of field within the PGA Tour, the DP World Tour, is pretty significant. So the bigger the field, the stronger or they'll get some, I say, bonus points, so to speak, because it's a cut event. Whereas LIV, the problem that LIV currently has is yes, you have some of the top golfers on the field. It's a field of 48 guys. The guys that used to be ranked much higher are continuing to free fall because they're not playing events to get their OWGR high enough, or continue to keep their OWGR high. So their ranking system, or even if they were to brought into, let's just say today, we made the decision, we had the power to say, hey, LIV deserves points. They actually wouldn't get that many because it's a limited field and they don't have very many people that are ranked highly anymore. Bryson is an exception because he did very, very well at 2 majors, which I think he's probably 12 or 13 right now, which, quite frankly, Bryson probably is a top 5. I mean, definitely top 10, maybe top 5 player in the world. So his performance in those majors, the strongest fields in golf, are continuing to allow him to have a higher ranking. Whereas Dustin Johnson, for example, he has not done well for the last 2 years in the majors that he's been exempt in because he's won a major in the past. So his ranking is awful. And many other guys, I'll use Taylor Gooch, for example. He's a LIV golfer who went and has decided not to try to qualify for these events through the qualifying series. His ranking has free fall because he's not playing in events. So a lot of times you'll see these LIV golfers go on and play Asian Tour events or some DP World Tour events they've been allowed to play in. And they have to do well, and they're doing that to buoy their OWGR because they're playing at events that have OWGR points. So it's a pretty tough scenario. The PGA Tour, or excuse me, the OWGR is in a tough spot in that they should be inclusive of LIV, but also they have to have rules on how to be able to rank people fairly. And LIV is in a tough spot because in order for them to get those, they're going to have to completely change how they do business or how they run a tournament. And I don't know if they're willing to do that. Yes, they're making incremental changes. I don't know if they're going to be big enough to kind of change the OWGR's mind.
Very interesting stuff. In terms of how the OWGR is structured, have they gone through evolutions in recent years or through the decades since its inception? And has it gone through anything significant, big changes like what it would need to do to accommodate LIV?
They've changed weighting of the points and that kind of it used to be a 3-year running total of events. Now it's 2. They limit it to basically your best 50. So if you play 60 events, they'll kind of negate some of those. The only thing that LIV kind of has, I would say, in their bucket is just it only took the PGA Tour about, I don't know, I think fairly quickly to make a decision to include the PGA Tour China in their world golf rankings. And so LIV kind of said, well, you did it for them. Why didn't you do it for us? And the pretty easy answer for the OWGR was to basically say, well, they follow the parameters and you don't. And so I'm hopeful. I'm kind of in the place where I think LIV is actually going to continue to exist for a couple years at least. I'm hopeful that some of the conversations that are happening now that no one's really sharing a whole lot of information, that they can at least figure out a compromise on how to include LIV in the OWGR. But LIV's going to have to give up a little bit, I think, probably with the who's allowed in, who's allowed out, because currently the way it's structured, because they essentially are paying people to come play on this select invitational tour, they can't really say there's open qualifying for that. Or they, like I said, what they've established this year is a start, but I just don't know if it's going to be enough for them to kind of pass the OWGR board.
Yeah, even if they OGWR were criticized for letting in the PGA China tour so quickly, it doesn't change the actual structure of the rankings, and LIV would inherently have to change how it's calculated. It would be a shame if they were to accommodate LIV and then a couple of years later LIV dissolves or just changes its format back to a very traditional golf league. And I think the OWGR doesn't want to just morph into whatever the hottest, thing is this year. So and I mean, golf is a very traditionalist type of sport, so you can kind of understand where they're coming from. Is that kind of the only, I guess, criticism OWGR has faced? And is there anything else that's kind of controversial in terms of that? And then if not, then I want to launch into the whole weighting, comparing different events to each other.
Yeah, I think there's definitely people you see at some of these events that, let's just say, are now top 50 in the world, and you're like, how on earth did they get there? I've never heard of this person, and they probably have done really, really well on the DP World Tour or even the Asian Tour. And so I don't want to call them manipulators, but it's one of those, hey, if I know that I can go over to this tour and do extremely well and have the ability to get into the top 50, I may actually be a top 100 person in the world, but not quite. But I can go to this tournament, and I think that the weight is a little bit stronger for me to have that potential. So there's definitely, I don't want to say ways around it or way to kind of boost your. I'll use Alex Noren, for example. He's a much better player now, but Alex Noren got to the top 10 in the world, I think it's probably 4 or 5 years ago now, and he hadn't done anything. And it was like, where did this guy come from? And it's because he was doing so well on the DP World Tour and kind of had those. So there's always going to be, any sort of ranking system is always going to have its flaws. I truly think they're doing the best that they can under the structure they have. The only last thing I'd say about the LIV stuff is let's just say, the OWGR made the decision today to allow them in. Those events currently wouldn't be weighted very heavily because it's only 48 players and there's a no-cut event. And so they wouldn't quite get and the players currently have fallen so far down the OWGR that it's not it wouldn't be that significant in terms of strength of field. So enough time has passed to where LIV has diminished itself, not on purpose, but because of the system that's been in place. Even if things were to change today, the strength of schedule of those fields would be pretty poor outside of, like I said, maybe 3 or 4 golfers.
Very interesting stuff, especially your example of how Alex Noren was able to game the system. He could strategize his schedule or where he chooses to play to maximize his official world golf rankings points and therefore his ranking in the world. Um, is there any other ways that players can gamify the system?
Not that not that I would know. I'm sure they're much more up on those ways and kind of how to qualify. But the reason why that's important is, like I said, if you're in the top 50 of the world at certain checkpoints, you're getting into all the majors, and that's a big deal because those turn into, once you sort of get into that top 50, and you're getting those exemptions into the majors. All it takes is, hey, maybe I top 40 one week, and that looks really good because those are the strongest fields, and so it sort of just snowballs on itself once you get in and have the opportunities, because opportunity can really just allow for an expansive chance down the road. So we'll use the signature events. So we'll kind of roll into that. For example, is the reason why the FedEx Top 50 was so important is the people that finished in the top 50 this week are into all the signature events next year, and that's a big deal because one, that's where all the money is almost 2.5 times as much for those events. A typical purse for a low level PGA Tour is 8 million, and for a signature event it's 20. Some are 25 million. That's a big deal. OWGR, we'll use Tom Kim for example. His OWGR is actually going to carry him into signature events. He finished outside the top 50, so he finished 51st. So he did not get that exemption into the signature events next year. But his OWGR, I think, is like 20. I don't know exactly what it is. But his OWGR will allow him to still play those signature events, which was interesting. So it's really important to kind of know your standing on both the FedEx Cup playoffs or the FedEx list, as well as the OWGR, because that allows the opportunities to play in the majors and allows the opportunities to play in the signature events, which continue to kind of alter the schedule of the top players.
Yeah, you made a good point. It's important to differentiate FedEx Cup points versus official world golf ranking points. They are different. Tom Kim came 51st in the FedEx Cup standings, but he's placed much higher in the world ranking list. I was just scanning looking for names yesterday that might be worth talking about or that stuck out to me. One worth mentioning, and yeah, I don't want to take a tragic event and just drag it out, but Grayson Murray, I was shocked noticing his name in the top 70, having qualified for the tour playoffs because he won an event in January. We've talked about his situation in the past. He took his own life, and James and I had a very respectful conversation about the whole thing. So we don't need to dive into it. For those listeners who are new to the show, go and check it out. It's a very important subject and a very tasteful conversation we had about it. So I was shocked to come across his name. Jordan Spieth is one who stuck out to me. It looks like he didn't qualify for the second round of the playoffs. I'd be curious how that stacks up to the OWGR list. If he has still qualified for those signature events for next year, if he's in the top 50 in the world, or if he's been sliding. Do you know?
He's going to take 3 months off for wrist surgery, so that's a big deal because he may be able to take a major medical, which is a whole different thing. The interesting thing when you look at someone like Jordan Spieth or Ricky Fowler or even Justin Rose, who also he's outside the top 50, they are such popular players that sponsor exemptions are going to come their way. So even if they were to fall outside of the top 50 or whatever the number is for whatever tournament it is, they're likely going to get in because of that. But Jordan Spieth has had a tough year, 2 years even. So he's definitely fallen. I think he's still inside the top 50 OWGR. I'm not positive on that, but again, he's sweating a lot less than say somebody who Mackenzie Hughes, for example, I think finished 52nd. I didn't even realize I picked a Canadian. Saw your head nodding. So for him, for example, is a little different because he's not going to be that big name that's going to get in these events no matter what. And so he's likely going to have to play his way in to some of these signature events by playing in the smaller events, and then hopefully moving his OWGR up, or having good enough performance to where he does get into that top 50. So it's interesting because, they try to be fair in terms of ways to get in and out. I'd say it's a lot harder to get in the top 50 than it is to get out. It kind of takes some time for you to shed those points that you may have earned to get in. And so once it's really kind of a grind to try to work your way up into it.
Whoops, sorry, I was muted there. Absolutely. Using Mackenzie as an example, he was 52nd in the FedEx Cup standings, hoping to climb up the list, and his world number is only 64. And so he really could have used these playoffs, if he had performed better, to improve his OWGR ranking. So, he's not in a great position. Those guys you mentioned, like Ricky Fowler, Justin Rose, Jordan Spieth, they have that fan appeal, almost celebrity status, at least in the golf world. And so that will help them get those sponsors exemptions. When you look at OWGR rankings, are there benefits to that calculated number other than just qualifying for events?
Yeah, I mean, I think saying a top 10, yes, just kind of the appeal of sponsors, and the it's gonna help their pocketbook. But in terms of benefits, just outside of that, I don't see a whole lot. Basically everyone's going to drive to be the number one player in the world, and that's always kind of the goal. But I think that it's all tied to money, and so the benefits they're going to get is money. In terms of the PIP program doesn't exist anymore. But the last 2 years, if you were performing well and your ranking was doing well, and you're in the kind of the appeal for the PIP ranking was based off of your on-course performance, and then also your social performance, so to speak. I think it was the Nielsen rating or something. Some rating was so the more you were able to kind of get have exposure, really changes things. So I don't think, outside of kind of your standing within qualifying for tournaments, like let's just use the Ryder Cup for example. So the higher you are ranked on is your ability to potentially get in the Ryder Cup or the President's Cup, and so those top players have more exposure to those kind of events. But outside of those and the pocketbook, I don't think it's too significant.
I got you. And to circle back, tie this into cards, we typically think of three things for a player's cards to be collectible: long-term legacy, the likes, the all-time greats, Tiger Woods, Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer, etc. Recent performances, so the guys who are super hot, winning events right now, the Scotty Schefflers, Xander Schauffele's, Bryson DeChambeau's, and even a step, below them, like when Tony Finau goes on a hot streak, even if he's not a major winner, I would include him in that, recent success category. And then thirdly, prospective hype, things of that nature. The world rankings list could kind of formulate a number to quantify some of that, especially recent performances. Top 10, obviously they're winning events. It's an indicator that their cards are collectible. But then I look at guys like Patrick Cantlay, who people aren't really collecting his cards, even though, he's been a top 10 player for a long time. Maybe he's sliding out into the top teens, but still he's top 15 player in the world. How can we use this list, the top players in the world, to kind of calculate who is collectible? Because you look at I don't know, Jordan Spieth, and it's just his past performances, not recent, but past, that's really keeping him in. And somebody like Ricky Fowler, he hasn't had a lot of success, so it's really just his personality. Is there a way to use this OWGR to kind of predict card prices and who's collectible?
I think the kind of the three buckets you put them were spot on. The legacy tied to majors. That's sort of the longevity. Brian Harmon I don't want to say won't, but the chances that Brian Harmon wins another major is not nearly as high as others. But he will forever be an Open Championship winner, and so therefore people are going to remember that. And it may dwindle a little bit, but I'll remember that Brian Harmon won an Open Championship. So the legacy is always going to be the biggest impact. The current tournaments, like we'll use Grayson Murray for example. collecting him, collecting him after he won was a big deal, because it's like, all right, he's on his way up and kind of might make an ascent with his ranking. And so I think the hard one is the prospects. There is an amateur world ranking. I will say it's about as flawed as it gets, or it's a lot harder to kind of ascent. But the top 5 amateurs typically turn into really good pros. Luke Clanton would be the prime example that I would use right now. He's got, as an amateur, he's got 3 top 10 or top 5s on the PGA Tour this season. He just played in the United States Amateur this past weekend and didn't get beyond the round of 32. You can't tell me that he's not somebody who is going to have an impact on the PGA Tour in future years. And so I think watching those amateur tournaments and seeing how, or maybe the top 5 on the PGA Tour U. So Ludwig Aberg was ranked number 1 in college for 2 years, and it was clear, like, that's somebody we need to really pay attention to and really look at as someone who can make an impact. So I think you have a better chance of following that with prospects than you do necessarily on OWGR and how that affects outside of majors. If somebody wins a major, that changes the game, but how OWGR may affect their collectability.
Now, what about comparing events? Qualifying for Olympics, comparing majors to regular PGA events or other tours. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I'm call me a little old school. I love the 145 field cut events where you've got to show up every day and make the cut and have a chance to win. I'll give the example of Wyndham Clark for the Olympics. Wyndham Clark was raked over the coals for 2 reasons. One, people didn't think he should have got selected to the Olympics. I agree. I thought Bryson should have been the guy. He went out and shot 75 in the first round of the Olympics. I think was second to last, or in the bottom 5, was way out of it. And then he had basically his last 3 rounds tied for the best last 3 rounds of the tournament with Scottie Scheffler. So he showed that he deserved to be there. I think he ended up tied 12th or something. But had he played that way in a regular full field event, he might not have made the cut, and because of such a bad round. So I'm definitely more, I guess, I lean towards the full field events. Like, the Players Championship used to be the best field in golf because LIV is not involved. I don't think you can probably say that anymore. But that used to be the hardest cut to make and the hardest tournament to win. And so I always lean towards those just because the depth of professional golf is significant. When you're starting to narrow down the amount of people in events, the easier it becomes to win. And while, Scottie Scheffler can beat 59 guys just as easy as he can beat 140 guys, those are, there's 70 more, bad math, there's 80 more guys that he has to worry about to potentially to take out. And the difference between, let's just say somebody middle of the pack and somebody that is the top is, one stroke around, which, is significant on some levels, but also, all those guys on those tours can shoot 63 on any day. They're all good enough to do that. It's just, can they do it 4 days in a row? So that's kind of an important part of things when it comes to that. So
Yeah,
I like
I totally hear you. That these events that you're describing have a much deeper field. There's a cut, so you can get filtered out and not even have a chance to shoot hot on the weekend. And as you said, all 140 of these players could shoot lights out on a given day. So there's just, even if you're the best player in the world, someone can outshoot you on every now and then. But if we were just to say, okay, let's do almost like a rapid fire, like how many regular PGA events should be equivalent to a major? So how many PGA wins should be worth a major win?
Oh, goodness, that is a can of worms, because I fear that my answer is going to change whether or not we think Scottie or Xander should be the top.
Well,
but
feel free to answer it in 2 different ways. Feel free to answer it, one, in terms of the actual quantifiable OWGR rankings, and secondly, in terms of legacy.
Yeah, it's tough on the OWGR. It's tough because it depends on, like I said, a John Deere. You could win 3 John Deeres and it's not worth a signature event. That's just the bottom line. And I'd say about half of the events on the PGA Tour schedule are that way. If the top guys aren't showing up, then the strength of field is not great. But let's just say, let's compare a major to a signature event. So signature event are the top, I think it's 80, well, it's 60 to 80 guys depending on the tournament. I would say you probably need to win 3 of those to equal in terms of strength of field, or in terms of importance of a major. So Scotty has won, I think, 4 or 5 signature events this year. And so that I would equal that to almost 2 majors. Now, if it was just a regular PGA, if you do a signature event to a regular run of the mill, it's probably about the same. 3 regular of the mill would equal 1 signature event. So it's sort of a graduated level of what I personally would compare. LIV, I would put on the regular PGA Tour event only because the depth of their field is not great. Like I said, they've got 15 to 20 guys that are really good, and then they've got 20 guys that don't belong on that tour and probably wouldn't even be, they might be Korn Ferry Tour members or DP World Tour members. They probably wouldn't even be PGA Tour guys. So it's definitely dependent on each tournament, but that's kind of how I would play it out.
Okay, so 3 regular events should equal 1 signature event, and then
Yep.
how many for a major in your eyes?
I mean, it's so. I guess I'm hesitating because it's tough. The Masters is a little bit easier. It's hard in terms of the course is so unique, but the Masters only has 85 guys in it, 30 of which are former winners or amateurs that have no chance. The U.S. Open is tough. I think to me, the U.S. Open and the Open Championship are the deepest and hardest fields to win. So I'd almost say, taking away the aura of Augusta National, I would say those 2, the U.S. Open and the Open Championship, should be weighted a little bit more because of the depth of the field and how difficult they typically set those up. So I think those are worth 5. Those 2 are worth 5, and then the Masters and the PGA Championship a little bit less.
Okay, and on the same playing field in terms of OWGR points as a signature event, because it's got a similarly deep field?
They should be, but they're not. The majors are weighted more heavy. Sorry.
And I think I disagree with you, because if you think purely in terms of the depth of field and it's like, if that's kind of your key ingredient, then yes, I understand why you feel like maybe a signature event and a major should be equivalent in terms of points. But to me, it's like saying, a player's rankings for basketball or baseball should be, the World Series or the basketball finals, and winning a championship should be valued the same as like a mid-season tournament or whatever.
Yeah.
Same caliber of players are there, but it's a more prestigious event. It's like, even if 2 mountain peaks are, the same height, one should be more, prestigious, let's say, just because of the obstacles you've had to take to get there and the mental hurdles you've had to overcome.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. It's kind of knowing the importance of the event. Yes, you got in, and yes, it's whether it's a deep field or not, you've got to bring your game that week. So I definitely understand why the majors are weighted more, because it's circled on your calendar every year, and you've got to show up that week. And that's why someone like Brooks has been an interesting kind of case study of, he hasn't necessarily performed all that well on regular season events. Of course, he just won LIV this past weekend, but his major record is pretty impeccable, because he's always said, hey, I know when I need to show up, and those are the weeks that I need to show up. So for him to be able to flip the switch when he needs to has always been pretty impressive.
Absolutely. And I actually wanted to finish off this conversation on Brooks. Before I do, though, I was just scanning through the mailbag questions just to make sure we hit on all the points. I think we did. Austin Bailey actually had a comment that really validates what we were saying, or what you were saying, is that he says actually he's a little surprised at the OWGR points assigned. So, for instance, the Open Championship is worth less than 2.5 times winning the 3M on the PGA Tour, which that really surprised me. And he says I would have put it at least 4 to 5 times as many points. I don't know. I don't
Yep.
remember if the 3M is a signature event or if it's just a regular PGA event. No, it's just a regular event. So, yeah, I agree, Austin. 4 to 5 times the points makes more sense. And if you think about it in terms of legacy, yeah, if a guy had a season where he won 4 or 5 times, that's a damn good season. And maybe that is equivalent in terms of hype, in terms of his name in the headlines, in terms of people like us talking about that player. If a player won 4 or 5 times, I think that would be equivalent to winning one Open Championship. And I think that the points on the OWGR should reflect that. Now, let's shift over because I think we've answered all the mailbag stuff. I wanted to just finish off just in terms of LIV qualifying for the majors. Uh, like Brooks Koepka, as you said, he's the first one that comes to mind. Other guys would be like Taylor Gooch. Another one would be Bryson DeChambeau. These guys are worth thinking about. So Taylor Gooch was Player of the Year, in LIV's inaugural season, had the most wins. Brooks Koepka recently eclipsed him. Brooks now has 5 wins on the LIV Tour, the most wins on LIV. Uh, and then we look at Bryson, who I don't even know. I think he maybe has 1 win on LIV, yet he has a major this season. He shot that historic, I think it was a 58 or a 59. Uh, an amazing player. What? Here's my question. What would it take for either of these three guys to qualify for a major if they had not yet qualified and they had to go through the grind of qualification?
Yeah, depends on the major. But the big thing with Brooks and Bryson is because they are previous major winners, they get exemptions into, depending on the major, you get either a 3-year exemption into the next majors or 5 for Bryson. He won the U.S. Open, so he's good for a while. But in order to qualify, let's just use the U.S. Open, for example, they would have to go through, I think it's 3 rounds of qualifying. So there's local qualifying. So there's 50 sites around the United States that you can say, I'm going to play my qualifying round at, in Dallas, Texas. And this is the course that I feel most comfortable. And typically, depending on the site, 7 to 10 guys get through to the next qualifying. And then the final qualifying series it's called the longest day in golf. It's 36 holes in one day on a Monday. And so they go and have to qualify. And again, depending on the site, will depend on how many actually get through from that site. So there are, like I said, there's 60 for the U.S. Open. There's the top 60 in the OWGR get in, and so they fill out the rest of the field with 70 to 80 guys based off those qualifying sites. So the difficult part through that is because it's literally one day. You could have a bad day in that local qualifying series and you don't get through, or you could have a bad day on your round of 36. And not get through. So I think that I'm not as in tune with what the Open Championship is, but I'm guessing it's very similar. The Masters is a little different. It's an invite-only tournament. But for example, Joaquin Niemann got an invite this year. And it's because he went and played well on Asian Tour events. And so the Masters kind of put the whole LIV thing aside and said, hey, you went out and did what you needed to do to show us that you deserve an invite. And while his OWGR has fallen because of his LIV experience, they still invited him in. Taylor Gooch didn't do that. And so Taylor Gooch has chosen at every level to not go try to qualify. His decision is his decision, but he has had his opportunity to do that, but hasn't. With the U.S. Open, I think there was 7 or 8 guys that actually qualified for the U.S. Open through that qualifying. I know Sergio was one of them because he kept his his consecutive U.S. Open played alive. So there's been, there are ways to do it. It's just a matter of kind of, are you willing to put your money where your mouth is and show that you still have the game to be able to do it?
Let's end with this. What percentage of chance would you give either Bryson or Brooks on that longest day of golf? Like they show up at the first tee with all the other guys. Are they a 50-50 shot? Because they obviously have to come top 1 or 2 or 5 or whatever. Or just because of their skill level and their talent, are they like a 90% shoe in?
I'd put it somewhere in between those two. I'd probably say 70%. Yes, they are better than everybody else in that field in terms of just raw skill and talent. The fact that it's 36 holes is very helpful because it's you've got to do it, twice as much. If it was a one day, 50-50 might be nice. Like that's or a one round. If it was a one round, but 2 rounds is a little bit different. So you typically see the guys, who should qualify end up qualifying because of that. It sort of eliminates the variance. If it was just that 118 hole round, the variance would be much higher. So I would put it anywhere between 60 and 75% just based off of that. But it's still, it's not a guarantee. You got to show up and play well.